Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Today we are going to cover Aubrey Gordon. I almost forgot her name for some reason, but we are going to cover her again. I noticed Nadia Nymph made a video about her, and I was thinking of making a video about her anyways. I've been wanting to do a podcast, so I was like, hey, let's do it. Let's do it now. I have some time today. So we're going to do a bit more of a deep dive. I have no idea what Aubrey is going to say. This is going to just be a reaction. My expectations are that she will ultimately say most of the fat acceptance talking points, and we're going to go ahead and go through it. So we can consider this probably somewhat of a review. We'll see if she does say anything new. I'll be interested to see what happens. So let's do this. Okay.
This is All of It. I'm Allison Stewart. Almost exactly 7 years ago, in February of 2016, a 30-something woman published a letter she'd written to a friend. It was posted online under the pseudonym Your Fat Friend. The letter read in part, quote, I need you to say the word fat about me, because I am. I'm a size 26, fat enough that some stores for fat people don't carry my size, fat enough that some doctors will refuse to see me, fat enough that getting on an airplane makes my blood run cold because they might kick me off without a refund for my ticket, or they might charge me double, and then I will have to explain to my friends, job, family why I can't make it on that trip. Every discussion about bodies, whether in the media or amongst friends, is about how to avoid the horrible fate of looking like me. I need you to hear that this all hurts and happens all the time.
So what I hear from that essentially is apparently she wrote an article. I actually covered Your Fat Friend a bit on this channel. I had no idea it was Aubrey at the time. I was kind of shook when I figured it out, or when you guys told me, basically. And to me, that just reads like, I want you to understand that I identify with being fat as a part of my identity, which I find at this point in my life incredibly cringy, to the point where it's laughably ridiculous. And that's just where I'm at personally. I've been fat my entire life. I've been fat since I was at least 7 years old, like around there. And so to me, as somebody who's been a long hauler fat ass, it is not real to identify with your weight in this way, in the way that Aubrey does. It's incredibly toxic. It's also very foolish. And it is just a big circus, sideshow, distraction thing to do in your life when you ultimately likely have other issues to worry about, in the sense that your identity of being fat is not an important thing. It just isn't. If you are having issues where you cannot fit on a plane, if you are having issues where it's really debilitating your life in a way that you don't like, or you're seeing all these different things, that's a sign that you need to do something about it. That's what that should be. But Aubrey has the view of, instead of her changing at all, the entire world should change for her. I don't think that that's very wise, especially not about the issue of fatness, when it's just as bad for her as it is for everyone else. It's not a good thing, okay? Let's go ahead and continue.
Within 1 week, 40,000 people had read that letter. Since then, Aubrey Gordon has claimed her space as a fighter for size justice and fairness. She is the co-host of the Junk Science.
So I always like how they use these words that hold meaning to try to manipulate what it is. So what I would call it is size gaslighting. That would be a better way, or a more accurate interpretation of what it is that Aubrey is doing. Size gaslighting and abuse. Because some of the way that Aubrey treats her friends are horrific. Like, some of the articles in Your Fat Friend are really disgusting, the way that she expects her friends to be treated, or the way that she expects her friends to treat her. And it's like she has all these weird power dynamics in her friendships where it's like they're coming back to her. They're asking her, oh my gosh, Aubrey, did I please you? Did I do the right thing? Like, I don't think that that's a normal friendship. I think that that's something else. I mean, maybe abuse is too harsh. That's kind of just what came to my mind. But I would consider it at the very least codependent, toxic, unequal, not fair, not just, not any of these things. That's the kind of stuff that she advocates for. So no, I would say size gaslighting is a better terminology of what Aubrey's doing. So one thing you need to understand about me when it comes to Aubrey Gordon is I do not hold any benefit of the doubt with her. I think she is somebody who has negative intentions, honestly. I really do. I don't believe that about everybody in fat acceptance, but there are certain people where I just have a certain vibe. Again, doesn't mean anything to you, maybe not, but it does mean something to me. I don't view all of fat acceptance as people who have good intentions. I really don't. So in terms of Aubrey, I do think she has negative intention. I do. So I may come across as too strong for some of you guys when I react to her, but we're still going to do this. Here we go.
Bunking podcast maintenance phase, and she's become a champion for a
I also don't think she has a good dynamic with her co-host on the maintenance phase. I think it's not an equal friendship or dynamic whatsoever. It's like everything Aubrey says goes, and he basically has to bow down to every single thing that she says. That's kind of how she runs things. I'm not going to bow to Aubrey ever. So I don't give a crap if she wants to do her covert narc thing, if she wants to act like she's a victim about everything all the time. It doesn't do anything to me. I'm completely unfazed, and that's about it. I'm not saying she is that. I'm saying she has traits of one. That's all I'm going to say. So I feel like I have to be really on point with what I'm meaning when I talk about her, because people do not understand what I'm saying sometimes, and that's something I'm working on. I'm working on my messaging, but unlike Aubrey, I'll take accountability. Okay, let's go.
Population that doesn't get a lot of positive feedback. The follow-up to her 2020 book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat, sets out to take on some of the bogus beliefs and bad behavior.
What we don't talk about when it comes to fat are two very big things. We don't talk about eating a lot, typically, especially within fat circles and especially within people who are struggling with weight. It is like this hidden thing that people do not talk about. The other thing that we don't talk about is, for some reason, hypothyroidism never gets brought up in these discussions, ever. It is like the secret elephant in the room that nobody ever talks about in regard to obesity. Those two things are what people actually don't talk about whatsoever. And anything else, I'm pretty sure they talk about it. What people talk about all the time is feelings, how their body looks to somebody else, and a bunch of other distractions from the major issues, which are essentially that you're overeating and you need to figure out why it is that you're overeating. That's basically all it is. But we have to make sure that we talk about every single other thing possible, which I'm sure Aubrey will not talk about the fact that she's eating a lot, and she will not talk about hypothyroidism. Those two things will not come up. I would be utterly shocked. She may mention hypothyroidism as a one-off, but it would only be used as an excuse to never do anything about it, even though in the case of hypothyroidism, there are treatments of all kinds. There's a lot of stuff to be done to fix it. But, whatever.
Behaviors that affect fat people. Titled, You Just Need to Lose Weight, and 19 Other Myths About Fat People, the book is split into 4 sections. Section 1, Being Fat is a Choice. Section 2, But What About
It is.
Your Health?
Your health matters, and being obese does affect your health.
Segment 3, Fat Acceptance Glorifies Obesity.
It does.
4,
The reason it does is because in order to make obesity seem anywhere near equal to not being obese, you have to blatantly lie and gaslight about obesity to make it seem the same. So they do glorify it, because in order to uplift something that is so obviously worse, you have to promote it as good. Duh.
Fat people should, dot. This time of year, there are
Okay, fat people should what? Whatever.
endless articles.
I will just say, Aubrey, you have plenty to say about what thin people should do. You have plenty to say about what your friends should do. You have plenty to say about what all of society should do. You have plenty to say about what everybody should do. So, again, stop being a hypocrite. Okay?
And advertisements for living a healthier lifestyle and clean eating, which, as Gordon notes, are really code for weight loss. The book gets into discrimination, internalized oppression, and language, plus it offers some helpful language and probing questions at the end of the chapters. That's not to suggest that Gordon is telling people what they should do, but more what they...
No, she's always telling people what they should do. So, basically. But she's going to act like she's not.
shouldn't, which is be awful to people.
See? So what you shouldn't do is be awful to people. So in the same little blurb, there's a coded language of she is telling you what to do. But she's literally saying, I'm telling you what to do, but I'm not. It's so slimy. I do not like her. I really don't.
Writes, whether being fat is a choice for an individual or not, they do not deserve discrimination, harassment, or unkind treatment because of their size.
I could agree on that. But I think that we may have a different view on what's fair. And that's the issue. That's the crux of the problem. Because I don't think it's fair to kick somebody off of a flight because you're too big to fit in one seat. That is not fair at all, is it? According to Aubrey, it would be totally fair. I don't think it is. So that's where we're going to have a lot of issues.
The size of their bodies. None of us should have to change our appearance to, quote, earn basic respect and dignity. You Just Need to Lose Weight is out tomorrow, and I am pleased that Aubrey Gordon is our...
I will just say, just because you lose weight doesn't mean that people are automatically going to respect you. You cannot use blanket statements on every single person that you interact with. There are going to be people who respect you and disrespect you regardless of anything. That's just a function of being in the world. But what she wants to do is she wants to frame it in a fat person's mind that if they're being disrespected, it is solely because they are fat. So she wants you to incorporate your fatness as a part of your identity. And therefore, if somebody says something about being fat, then that means that they're saying something about you as a person, which is not true. So I will advocate the exact opposite. You should separate yourself from being fat. It is not a part of your identity. It is a state of being. As I said earlier in the rhetoric on this channel, you would not make being pregnant a part of your identity. You would not make being in high school that much of a part of your identity. Fatness is similar to that. It is a phase. It is a stage. It is something that you are currently in. It is a state of being, which can change. That's more so what it's like. She wants you to view it more so like being of a certain race or being of a certain sexuality or being of a certain sex, basically. That's what she wants you to view it as, which those can be a little bit more of a part of your core identity because it's something that is immutable. But being fat is not immutable, is absolutely not. So it's not at all similar to those other things. And often, actually most times, if not all, being fat is rooted in pathology, whether mentally or physically. So you do not want to identify with a pathology, something that causes problems, something that shortens your life, something that gets in your way in many different ways, regardless of if anyone else is around.
Guest. Hi, Aubrey. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for such a phenomenal introduction. I think that's one of the best ones I've gotten lately. That's great.
Thank you. You're a friend in my head because I'm a regular listener of Maintenance Phase.
Oh, yay.
When you first, I just want to do a little bit of history for folks who aren't familiar. You wrote anonymously under that moniker, Your Fat Friend. What led to that initial piece to be published?
Yeah, so that initial piece was an honest to God letter to an honest to God friend of mine. We had been having these sort of back and forth conversations. She is not a fat person. I am a fat person. And both of us have dealt with eating disorders. And it just felt like we kept sort of missing each other in those conversations, right? That both of us were sort of so attached to our own viewpoint that we were having a hard time bridging it. And I felt like I couldn't really get to the place with her of acknowledging that no matter how she felt about her own body, people still treated her like a thin person. And that was not a thing that I got to have as a fat person, right? That there was a.
So she's basically saying her entire everything that she's done in regards to obesity, in my opinion at least, is rooted in envy of thinness. It's rooted in envy of thin people. It's rooted in the perception, often false, that people just automatically respect you because you're thin. That's not true. But in her mind, it is true. And again, it's something that you can say to a fat person, and if they're not thinking critically at that moment, they can listen to that and believe it. And then when you believe it, then you'll look for it. When you look for it, you can develop a sense of cognitive bias in reality. And you will forget things that don't align with that and remember things that do. And rinse, wash, repeat. I think that it's kind of dumb to act as if every single thin person in the world is always getting vastly more respect than every single fat person in the world. You could come up with many different examples, many different, even intersections, especially in terms of class, for example, where somebody who has a lot of money, who is fat, will be treated with more respect than somebody who is very poor and who is thin. There are many, many other factors that go into that kind of thing. It's really pointless. And it's like a very pointless thing to even go to or even consider, because ultimately it does not reflect reality. Fatness within fat acceptance is elevated to a point where it is actually even more important than any of these other issues, to a sense that is absolutely ridiculous. Because I hate to break it to you, Aubrey, it's a lot easier, at least in my opinion, it's a lot easier to lose weight than it is to even have social mobility within class. And you can technically do both, but losing weight is, in my opinion, easier. It's easier to lose weight than to go from being poor to rich. But we're going to talk about how impossible it is to lose weight and all these different things all the time. It's just, it's so annoying. Anyways, if you're a fat person listening to me, just please think critically about what she says, because she'll say something and she tries to get you to feel this way, and it's not even real. Almost everything she says is a complete gaslight. That's why I would call her not size justice, but size gaslighting.
Real fundamental disconnect there. So I wrote a letter to this friend. I sent it along to another friend to proofread it and make sure I wasn't being the world's biggest jerk, right? And he suggested posting it somewhere online, and I said I would do it if I could do it anonymously. Mostly at that point because I had just started a new job and didn't want to create a bunch of challenges for myself there. And I posted it there, and he shared it to his like Facebook page, I think. And a bunch more folks started sharing it and reading it, and I just kept.
You mean you actually got respect and support even as a fat person? Doesn't that disprove your entire narrative? That's what always kills me about these people too. They say all this, but what they mean is you won't get respect. You won't get these accolades. You won't get noticed. You won't get this, but I will, because I'm the special one. I'm the special fatty. I'm special, because that's the only way that she could hold those two beliefs in her mind at the same time, that she'll get zero respect, even though this podcaster has basically worshiped the ground that Aubrey's walked on. So are you not being respected, Aubrey, as a fat person? But like I said, in her mind, I believe she thinks I'm special. I'm the amazing one. I'm different. So it doesn't matter because it's me. So I can do whatever I want and I will be respected because I'm special. I'm different. All the other fatties, you guys all suck and you guys are never going to be respected. Nobody gives a crap about any of you, but they care about me. See how weird it is? That's the only way she can have those two beliefs at the same time.
Great.
The response, 40,000 people read it in a week. Before all of this, had you ever thought about, I mean, because you're a community organizer, people should know that about you. So you have this great skill set. Had you ever considered using that skill set, your professional's tools, to fight bias against fat people before all of this?
I had, I had, and it became really challenging to think about how to do any real organizing around fatness and fat people, not because the energy there, but because, you know, as someone who was organizing in, LGBTQ communities, in immigrant communities, around voting rights, and on a number of sort of progressive political issues, almost every funder that I knew who might fund some of that.
So for any of you guys who are progressive or who are left wing in the audience, if you are angry about the fact that your side of things has made such a radical and weird turn on the issue of obesity that quite frankly, a lot of times does not even align with left wing values, especially their worship of corporate food, you can thank Aubrey Gordon. This is the one, her, right here. She's been the one that spearheaded a lot of this BS, apparently over the last 8 years. So just remember that. And I think that she has spent a lot of her experiences working in progressive spaces to learn how to manipulate people that are on that side. So I just want you to know that. She is actively manipulating you guys all the time.
Work was organized around health equity, which is phenomenal, except...
So she will use all of the language, she'll use all the different things to try to get you to align your politics with what she's saying. Even though obesity is not a political issue, it never has been, it's never going to be, it has nothing to do with politics. Often obesity, it really just comes down to personal responsibility, health issues, mental health issues, which you can talk about in a political sense, but certainly not in the way that Aubrey is talking about. Because the only way you can talk about it politically is in terms of like economy and in terms of access to healthcare, for example. That would be a political discussion that would affect obesity. But you can never politicize obesity to the point where because of politics, somebody will lose weight, or because of politics, somebody will gain weight. It doesn't work that way. I can tell you, as somebody who is losing weight, you will not lose weight because of politics. It is not something that people care about 24/7. I don't care who you are. In order to lose weight, you have to care about it 24/7. You have to have it on your mind, or at least consider it all the time, and have an intrinsic sense of motivation. Because if you are depending on the judgment of others, for example, to lose weight, you will have moments in the middle of the night where you're by yourself and nobody's around to judge you. And so you will still not lose it. It has to come from you, period. That's why it's not a political issue. Like I said, you can talk about it in a political sense. I certainly have my qualms when it comes to the institutions, how this issue is researched, the current research that is pushed above other research. There are issues that I have that I could talk about it in a more political type of way, but ultimately, it doesn't matter if the entire system changes tomorrow. People will not necessarily lose weight. They will not necessarily change because it's not a political issue. It's not systemic because the system can change tomorrow and nothing will change in a fat person because it has to do with here. This is the ultimate determination of your weight or if you're going to lose weight. Because even if you have hormonal issues, if you have access, you still have to have the desire to get the access or to utilize the access. And that's all. So it's not political. I will always argue on this channel that obesity is not a political issue. I am so disgusted with people like Aubrey Gordon who have politicized this issue. This is an issue that has, if anything, been more uniting in society, that they are trying to make a political thing, which I find really disgusting. I really do. Just on so many different levels. That's why, like I said, I do not view her as somebody with positive intention. I don't. I view her as somebody with very negative intention. That's why.
One of their measures for health equity at almost every single one of those funders was reducing obesity rates and having fewer fat people around, right? So
she acts like when you say that you want fat people to die. She's the one who wants fat people to die. You're the one who wants less people who are fat to be around, Aubrey. Stop with the gaslighting. You're the one who's doing that. Not them. Not me. That's you. Because again, you think you're going to be the exception. You're the special one that it's not going to get to. I can assure you, Aubrey, it will get to you.
Immediately became clear that
your health will suffer because of your size, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can gaslight every single person in the whole world. It will not change the fact that it's going to affect your health. It will not change the fact that you will have a shorter life and a lower quality of life. You've already had a lower quality of life by your own testimony. It is what it is. No matter how much you gaslight, it's not going to change.
There wasn't going to be money for it, right? To sort of do the work that needed to be done. And that even amongst sort of dyed in the wool progressive folks, there was still this like very, very, very deep bias around fat folks. And I sort of knew with a hand.
It's because it's a very obvious issue that isn't political. That's why. Because it has nothing to do with politics. And you saying that is manipulative. That's all I'm going to say. It's very manipulative.
Full of specific people that talking in an affirming way about fat people would be an absolute credibility buster. It would sort of destroy my relationships with some of those folks. So it became really challenging to think about how to do all of that without kind of a base layer, which is what I think a lot of the writing that I've done is around just like, when you say these things, here's how it lands, and here are the effects of those behaviors, just to get folks on board with the idea that this is actually like a pretty significant issue.
My guest is Aubrey Gordon.
It is significant, but it's significant in the sense that it needs a solution, needs multiple solutions. So I consider it significant because I want it to be solved. And I understand that obesity is not universal. That's another reason why systemic solutions will not affect obesity, because people are obese for different reasons, and you can't change a system to fix that. So one of the biggest issues that I have today, or that I try to get you guys to understand, is that we do not have a one-size-fits-all solution for obesity, and we never will. So we need to think about the issue of obesity differently than the sort of top-down narrative of the medical industry. It's not going to work that way. People need to assess why they're obese themselves and then seek out the solutions to those issues. And I agree that we need those solutions to be available to as many people as possible. And that's something that we can work on in a political way, which again, I don't think would be as politically divisive as many other issues, except for Aubrey making it that way. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, either subconsciously or even consciously, she specifically does not want this issue to move forward or does not want this issue to get better. I actually do. So I will fight her in complete opposition because, in my opinion, people like her are in my way of this issue getting solved.
The name of the book is You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People. You are very clear, and you have a glossary up front in the book. You use the word fat, and there's subsets of small fat, very fat, thin, not fat. But you really dig into the words obese, obesity. And
she doesn't like it because it represents a health marker and it represents health consequences. I think a lot of people in fat acceptance, they want to get rid of the word obese because they want you to think that being obese is the exact same as being 10 pounds overweight. And it's not even similar. That being super morbidly obese is even similar to being obese. It's not. But they want to get rid of those categories and those delineations medically so that we cannot talk about the issues clearly. So I will always use the terms obese. I will always use the term super morbidly obese, morbidly obese. I'm very clear about what category I'm currently in. I'm currently morbidly obese. These are the types of health issues I experience. This is that, etc. Because you see, my health has improved from when I was super morbidly obese, but my health still has much more to go, and I will document it the entire way because those medical categories are actually very useful, but they want to get rid of that because they want to cloud the issue more and more and more so that people don't know what they're talking about anymore. That's the whole point, because they don't want it to change. She doesn't want it to change. If somebody is arguing against using the word obese, whether they realize it or not, they are advocating for obesity to stay around and to get worse and worse. That's what they're fighting for when they do that, because the goal is to cloud what these different categories mean and what our conversations are about obesity. They want to be able to say, if you say fat, they want to be able to act like when you're talking about somebody who's 200 pounds overweight, they're going to act like you're talking about somebody who's 10 pounds overweight and you're trying to push somebody into having an ED. That's what it is. It's just a big gaslighting thing, and it's a way to confuse the conversation, try to change our language, which is very cult-like, Aubrey. And I'm not going for it. I'm not falling for it. And I advocate for all of you to not fall for it either.
Overweight, and why those words should be reconsidered, or people should at least understand what they're saying when they say those words.
I think in a lot of ways the word fat should be reconsidered and seen as a very subjective word. That's just a huge umbrella and can mean so many different things based on the context. Fat is a subjective word. So I'm not saying we shouldn't use it. I'm saying we should understand that it's subjective, that somebody can feel fat. You can't feel obese. Obese is a specific thing. That's why they want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
If you would share that a little bit, explain. So people are like, I'm sorry, I should ask the question. People are thinking like, so what's wrong with obese and overweight? Those must be medical terms. I think I'm saying the right thing.
You are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think many folks think of those as the more neutral words and fat as the...
They're just more objective. Fat is often used as an insult. So, but whatever, Aubrey, I guess it's okay to be disrespected as long as it's in the way that you want everyone to be disrespected. It doesn't make much sense to me, but whatever.
Less neutral word, right? I would say a couple of things. One, fat is considered sort of a quote unquote bad word, not because of what it means, which just means like a person in a larger body. There you go. But because of sort of what we attach to it, right? We attach all.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how they're so obsessed with promoting the word fat and they're so obsessed with getting rid of the word obese. It's so interesting to me because most people who grew up fat, especially in my generation or younger, fat is a horrible insult. It's something that people use to bully other people. It's something that people are constantly called and all these different things. And it has a lot more of a connotation to being mistreated for a lot of people, especially, I would say, especially women. It is like, even to this day, go up to a random woman and call her fat and see what's going to happen. It's probably not going to go over well. So I just think it's ridiculous why they're so obsessed with that. And that's why I point out they're likely doing it to cloud the meaning, because it doesn't make sense.
All of these other social meanings about like being a fat person means being isolated or being unloved or being unintelligent or being disregarded or what.
When people say fat, they usually are saying you don't look good. That's what it is. It means you look worse than you could because you're bigger. It's often a word that is based in how somebody looks. It's a very like appearance-based word. That's why it's subjective, and that's it. It's just you look fat. When somebody says a fat person, they mean somebody who looks fat, basically. I know I'm using the same definition, but someone who looks like they have an excess of adipose tissue. Okay, if we want to get technical. That's what it means. Obese is a medical term. Supermorbidly obese is a medical term. It has to do with an amount of adipose tissue. Or in some charts, like the one that I like, it's body fat percentage. So an amount of a body fat percentage. And those averages in regard to the risks associated with the amount of excess adipose tissue, which I think is a lot more useful. So I typically don't call myself fat. I typically will call myself morbidly obese. When I started doing my activism on this channel, I would call myself super morbidly obese. I made it a point to call myself that, and I will continue to call myself the different categories. Now, where I will humor fat acceptance is when I talk about social categories of fatness. I will use their terms like super fat, mid fat, small fat, mid size. I will use those terms to describe myself in a social sense, because those are more social terms, which I do think there is some grounds for that, because people do perceive you differently based on how big you are. So when I say it in those terms, I'm talking socially. When I talk about myself medically, health-wise, or just in general, I will use obese. Well, at this point, morbidly obese, because I want us to be clear about what these different things are, essentially, because I try to be very specific. So, anyways, let's go ahead and continue.
Ever, right? Those are all things that we sort of pile on to a word that is otherwise a pretty neutral descriptor of someone's body, right? Versus overweight and obese, both of which are rooted in the body mass index, which has a long and sort of really troublingly racist history. And both of those also imply that there is a correct weight for every body to be.
So we're getting to the using race. So this is also similar. With that, she wants to manipulate people into feeling like if they say something against what she's saying, that they are racist, or there's an implication that if you say something against what she's saying, that you're a racist. That's ultimately what that's about. So it's another manipulation, essentially to try to silence criticism or to silence you if you don't agree with her, which I think is manipulative, once again.
Overweight is the question popularly amongst fat activists. Over what, like what right weight? And obese, it's worth saying, literally comes from the Latin and means to have eaten oneself fat.
Which they want to cloud the meaning, because again, we can never talk about eating a lot, ever.
So even just the term obese has sort of built in this explanation that is just like, oh, they're just gluttons. That's how they got that way. And you don't need to pay attention to them, right? It's worth noting too that I think folks think that the medical nature of those terms makes them more neutral. And I think for many of the fat folks that I know who have been denied healthcare by healthcare providers with some pretty profound anti-fat bias and have had really sort of hair-raising experiences at the doctor's office, the fact that a doctor says a word doesn't.
There are many reasons to criticize the medical established institutions. There are plenty of areas where they go wrong. There's plenty good, there's plenty bad. There are conversations to be had about it. There are even conversations to be had about how they handle the issue of obesity or how they handle fat people. But having issues with the medical system is not only a fat issue. That's not true. It's not special. Again, Aubrey wants to uplift obesity and fatness to be more important than anything else, and that's not true. The issues that doctors have with fat people are just as important as the issues doctors have with women, the issues doctors have with whatever else, whatever other issue that there is going on. There are a lot of countries where it's difficult to get a doctor's appointment, for example. That's an issue that would affect a lot of different people, not just fat people. So you have to understand that she's framing all this so that in the minds of fat people, they will hear this and think, my issue is worse. My problem is worse than anyone else. And remember, you guys, that the medical system will never be perfect. No system will ever be perfect. So she will always say this because there will always be at least one mistake made in the entire world around the issue of fatness. But how she talks about it is she frames it like not only that it's the most important issue, but that it's worse than any other issue. And that is not true at all.
Make it more neutral for those folks, and it actually calls up quite a bit of that really terrible treatment that folks have faced.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easier to understand some of the big obvious cases of anti-fatness, from annoying and hurtful unsolicited comments, job discrimination, people can wrap their heads around that, the very serious issue of being gaslit medically. But I'm curious, what's a small microaggression against fat people that really has a big impact?
Oh gosh, that's a great one. I will say this is a personal.
Does she have like a list? That's so funny to me. She can be like, oh, this is my favorite fat microaggression. Okay. All right, Aubrey, let's go. What is it?
One for me. I think there are two that jump out as big little microaggressions. One is recommending diets or offering to be a gym buddy or sort of being the encouragement friend to a fat person who has not expressed.
I don't even know if that's, I don't know. You know, I'm not completely versed on what a microaggression is, but from what I understand it is, that seems like a big commitment for a microaggression. I don't think that would necessarily fit into the category, because from what I understand, a microaggression, which the studies on it, in my opinion, they're kind of mixed on if it's even a thing. But if we are going to say that it is a thing, I will say that it's one, heavily based on how somebody interprets it. So it's extremely subjective. And number two, it's usually short and quick. It's something fast. So it's subjective and quick. Somebody telling you, I want to be your gym buddy, you still have to interpret it as a negative thing in your mind. And also, it's not really quick, because what if they do go with you? Then is that a microaggression? It doesn't make sense to me. It's like, this is a microaggression if this person is going to the gym with you for months. That doesn't make sense from my understanding of it. You guys can correct me in the comments. That's fine.
Any desire or intent to lose weight. seems like a little thing, seems like a helpful thing. I think when folks do it, they think they're coming from a good place, and sometimes they are. And the impact of that message is I'm paying attention to your body all the time, whether or not you are. And I've decided it's not right and it doesn't look okay.
I think that that's a huge leap. And I think that you have to really, I guess Aubrey, she's much more of a mind reader than I am, I guess. Like, I personally cannot say what Aubrey is thinking about at all moments and all the time. I can't say that. I don't know. I'm not in her head every single second of every day. I have my opinions based on her behaviors, based on the things she says, but I cannot know what she's thinking. So I think it's a huge leap to say, I know that this person is monitoring my body at all times and cares about it all the time. That sounds ridiculous to me. That sounds like just so incredibly stupid. But sure, Aubrey, it doesn't sound paranoid at all. It really doesn't.
The way it is now. So I'm going to quietly and in a gentle way insist that you change your body.
So I feel like when she says something like that, I feel like she's trying to get fat people that are listening to her to view those things as something negative. So again, I think this is a speculation. This is a thought. I'm not saying it as a fact, but I think that she used that question to push a talking point to further drive a wedge between fat people and weight loss behaviors, like weight loss or like exercise or like a diet. That's what I think.
The message is the same as someone saying, you look hideous today, or like, I wouldn't go outside looking like that, or whatever, right? The sort of underlying, the subtext message.
That's your opinion. That is totally your opinion. When I am attracted to somebody, I've told you guys a lot of times, I can be attracted to somebody across a certain span of weights. So it's not all about my terms. In my mind, at least, my attraction is not completely based upon somebody having abs, for example. Do I think that abs are nice? Sure, I do. But if somebody has abs, am I automatically going to be attracted to them? No. If somebody that I'm attracted to has abs, is it even better? Yes. But I would still be attracted to that person if they didn't. That's just my personal thoughts. She's saying that everybody feels a certain way. Everybody feels this way about it. I don't agree with that. You can't judge what every single person thinks or every single person is looking at in terms of size. Let me hear that one more time.
Quietly and in a gentle way insist that you change your body. The message is the same as someone saying, you look hideous today, or like,
Yeah. You can't assume that everybody thinks you look hideous because you're chubby or something. You can't assume that. It's too subjective. People's feelings about beauty are too subjective. And not everybody. There are some people who will think you're hideous, but there are some people who won't. So this doesn't work, Aubrey. You're painting too broad a brush.
Wouldn't go outside looking like that, or whatever, right? The sort of underlying, the subtext message is sort of the same, which is I'm paying attention to your body and you need to change it until you meet my standards. That's not how most of us think about those kinds of comments, but as a
because it's ridiculous. Because typically what it is you're my friend, so I don't even think about you in that way. Or you're my family member, so I really don't think about you in that way. And I'm worried about you because I see that you're struggling. I see that you're struggling to sleep properly. I see that you're struggling to process carbohydrates, like whether you're diabetic or, you eat a meal and you're really tired and all that kind of stuff. Like I see all these issues that you have and I'm concerned. So let's go to the gym. But again, Aubrey doesn't acknowledge that most fat people have health issues. Most fat people have these different things where there's problems. I would feel the same way if somebody was too thin, to where they were having problems where it's like they're passing out or something, or they're sick all the time, or there's these other issues. I would feel the same concern. And I would maybe say, hey, maybe you should look at something. Maybe something's going on here. But Aubrey can't acknowledge that there's any health consequences to being obese. She can't acknowledge it. At the very least, if it isn't because of outright malevolence, then it is because she herself is scared of her own mortality or her own issues. I tend to think it's more so the malevolent side, but you guys can think what you want.
That person, that's how those almost always land for me.
Because either way, it doesn't matter. Her impact is the same. It's incredibly negative. So, anyways.
The other one that I would say is, this one happened to me a couple years ago and still happens from time to time. Almost any time I'm like in a gym or engaged in any kind of physical activity, is there are sort of two things that will happen. One is folks will photograph me. That's not great. It doesn't feel great.
It's not right. You shouldn't do that.
Great. Because it feels like a straight line to many, many internet memes about, being repulsed by fat people. But the more insidious one is...
It's a legitimate gripe. That isn't fair. I don't think you should do that in general. And you shouldn't do that.
Is the number of people who will stop to sort of egg me on or encourage me, quote unquote. So I was out walking my dog last year in slides and my pajamas, right? Like very clearly a dog walking outfit, right? And someone stopped to say, "Good for you, you'll get there."
She had an Anna O'Brien moment, you guys. She's upset. She's so upset. I have a feeling Aubrey is she's sort of the kind of person where she doesn't want anyone to ever talk to her ever for any reason. Which I can honestly relate to. Like, I'm an introvert, so I will try, I can be polite when people talk to me, but I'm usually at least 10% irritated. At least, unless if I find the person really attractive, then I'm not. Because as introvert logic goes, you will go out for the D. Anyways, just have to keep that real. Anyways, let's continue.
Which was sort of this implication that my body was wrong, that I was on this path to weight loss, and that there's sort of not really a way for a fat person to engage in physical activity without also that being sort of resituated in this frame of like, you must be on your way to being thin, and I'm going to affirm you while you're on your way to being thin, but not in those.
I don't think people think of it that deeply. I really don't. Most people are just living their lives and they're just seeing somebody walking and they're like, hey, that's cool. That's about it. I mean, I don't think it's that deep. I said the same thing to Anna O'Brien. I really don't think it's that deep. You have to really interpret so much and do so much mind reading in a situation that it's just like, if anything, it's a waste of your own energy and your own time, because it ultimately doesn't matter.
Other cases.
My guest is Aubrey Gordon. The name of the book is You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People. We'll have more with Aubrey after a quick break. This is all of it. Interesting structure because it takes on some of these myths and gets into the background of things like BMI not ever really being invented by scientists, and also a really long time ago and having been debunked quite a bit. And then also at the end are some questions that people can ask themselves. They can pose to other people. You kind of get into people to get real about what they think. For example, on the chapter on glorifying obesity, that fat acceptance glorifies obesity,
It has to, because it's trying to make fatness and obesity, we should say. It's trying to make obesity, morbid obesity, equal with being of an average weight, which is not the case. So in order to do that, you have to glorify it because it is so clearly worse. So you have to glorify it to try to make it seem like it's equal. I don't know if they either don't understand that or if it's a gaslight manipulation type of thing. But either way, I'll explain it every time.
Have a list of things that people can say to someone who uses this phrase.
Let's see if I have anything to say back. Right off the top of my head. I'll try for the sass. Let's see.
Or if someone is starting to go down that road in the conversation. Would you share a couple of things that people could say and why it's powerful for people to interrupt that conversation?
Yeah, so I'll just back us up one half step,
Sure.
which is it feels important to talk about where these sort of accusations of glorifying obesity, quote unquote, sort of tend to live, which is on the internet and usually in response to a fat person in a bathing suit or a fat person eating food or a fat person doing pretty...
No, I see it usually in terms of people responding to fat acceptance rhetoric. That's my experience of what I've seen. There are times where people hate on people who are fat, but again, everybody online is hated on. But Aubrey wants to uplift fatness as it should be the special situation where nobody's ever hated for being fat for some reason, but there's a lot of hate to go around, and fatness is just one of the things. It's just one other step or one other thing that people will hate you for, basically. But I see a lot of people saying things against glorifying obesity, oftentimes in response to fat acceptance rhetoric.
Common everyday activities, but they are made notable because they are fat. And when you sort of push folks on this idea of what does it mean to glorify obesity? What are you afraid will happen? What they'll often give you is some sort of narrative about then people will think it's okay to be fat, and then a bunch of people will suddenly get fat.
Which has happened. It's completely happening. So notice the gaslighting again. She's trying to act like if they say this, but there's no way that could happen, then why has obesity skyrocketed, Aubrey? It has skyrocketed since the 80s. Since you've been alive, Aubrey, it has skyrocketed. So there is a reason why people say that. It's not the only reason why people are gaining weight like crazy, but it is a part of it because it is being glorified.
Right? Which is a little bit absurd when you...
It's a little bit literally objectively happening and something that anybody and everybody can observe, especially in the United States since the 80s.
Start to unpack it. So I wanted to include some questions to
Gaslighter.
Lead folks through that thinking on their own. Things like, what is this person doing that glorifies anything? Right? Wow, they're glorifying obesity just by having their picture taken. It looks to me like that person is just having a good day. Good for them. Or leave her alone, let her live her life, right?
Everyone gets hate comments. Everyone. It's a part of the internet.
All of these are things that you sort of can say, should you so choose, in the face of those sort of moments of quote unquote glorifying.
Sure, you can defend people against hate if you want to. You can. I'm not going to sit here and be like, you shouldn't do that. Da-da-da. That's fine. Okay, next one, Aubrey.
Obesity accusations that are usually just actually underneath all of that about feeling uncomfortable seeing a fat person, and particularly...
They might think it doesn't look good. It is what it is. There are some people who think thin people don't look good. There's some people who will just think you don't look good personally. It is what it is. Not everybody will find you attractive. And some people, when they see somebody that they find unattractive, they will be a bitch about it. It's just a reality. It's going to happen at some point of your life if you choose to be online. If you don't want any negative comments ever, then don't be online because it's a function of the internet. It will eventually happen. It could happen super rarely, but it will occur at some point. It is what it is. It also will happen in real life. People don't always find everyone attractive, and some people are assholes about it. It's just a way of the world. I mean, what are you going to do? Control what every single person says all the time? It's ridiculous.
Feeling uncomfortable seeing a fat person having a good time and not actively engaged in weight loss and the pursuit of becoming a thin person.
This time of year, there's a lot of promotion of healthy living and exercise. Both great on the surface, nothing wrong with either. But I'm curious if there's some marketing you've heard lately that you really want to call BS on. We can't say the real thing. On podcast, you can. Live radio, you can't. And when did you notice the shift from weight loss to health? That's been a huge marketing shift.
It has been a huge market.
It's because people have started to experience health issues en masse on social media, and people are sharing their experiences of health problems en masse on social media. So it is shifting to be more about health, which that's okay. That's a good thing. That's a very positive change because being as thin as possible is not always being healthy. That's also a reality. You can be thin and very unhealthy. So making the focus more about health is a very positive change. I love that they're painting it as negative. You know, I'm not big into the heroin chic type of thing and the restrictive ED side of things either. I don't like it either. I equally don't like it. But one of those is incredibly seen as a huge issue. And there's so much research that goes into it. And there's so much everything against it. And the other side of it, of being really big or having BED, is completely laughed at, ignored, or not taken seriously by most people, especially by someone like you, Aubrey. So I have a huge issue. So I'm going to spend more time talking about that because most people understand that a restrictive ED is bad. A lot of people don't understand that BED is bad. It is. It's a huge issue. It's just as deadly. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be researched. There's a lot more people that have overeating issues than undereating issues, especially in the United States. So it needs to be researched more. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be explored, not constantly put down, gaslit away, and talked over by people like you, Aubrey.
Shift. It feels like it's been sort of brewing over the last, 5 or 10 years.
Imagine having an issue with people caring about health. Okay, Aubrey, that's you. You have a problem.
And truly, most notably with Weight Watchers rebrand to WW, feels like a big one, right?
I'm not personally a huge fan of Weight Watchers, but if it worked for you, good for you. I'm happy for you. Different solutions to different issues leading to obesity. Bing!
The marketing that is particularly getting under my skin at the moment is the number of diets, most notably Noom, that are marketing themselves as not really a diet. It's actually something else, and it's actually something elevated from a diet. Straightforwardly, when you create a Noom account, you are set on a calorie restricted diet for every day, right? Like that is, by its definition, restricting calories for the intent of losing weight is straightforwardly a diet.
Is there ever any reason to restrict calories, Aubrey? Is there ever a time where you should restrict your calories for any reason? Apparently not.
But there is this sort of like creeping awareness that folks are not as fully uncritical of diets and of...
She is so offended by somebody restricting their calories. It's amazing. She's so bothered by it. I'm not bothered by it. My friend Eric, you guys, he's currently in a deficit because he wants to get abs. And you know what his deficit is? 2,400. Should I be quaking in my boots? 2,400 with lots of exercise. Should I be quaking? Should I be offended? I guess according to Aubrey, I should be.
Diet corporations as they used to be. So there is now this sort of like changing of clothes happening in the weight loss industry, where it's sort of taking off its weight loss outfit and putting on its wellness and health outfit, right? But it's all fundamentally the same stuff.
I wanted to ask you before we run out of time, and we're going to hit it soon, is the movie The Whale has come out. And
Yeah.
Aubrey's like, I saw it. It was weird. I thought it was just kind of gratuitous, in my opinion. But it was a trip. But it was just kind of like, to me, it didn't have much meaning. That was my criticism of it. But I didn't think it was fatphobic. I just thought it was kind of meaningless. That was my opinion. But it's subjective, clearly.
For people who don't know, it's based on a play about a 600-pound man, and it's been made into this movie. And
I didn't know it was about a play, so I was very confused. But after that was explained to me, then I understood it a lot better. So I wish I would have known that before I watched it, because it was really confusing plot-wise. It was super weird structure.
while the main actor has gotten a lot of accolades, a lot of people have written that it is at the kindest,
He did a good job.
it is misguided, and at the worst, it's exploitative.
We need to censor it, you guys, immediately.
Sorry, I've got about a minute for you. I'm just curious when you, yeah, right? This was really nice of me, right? Anyway.
No, I got you. Do it in a minute. Got it. I'm ready.
Thoughts
I
on
mean,
The Whale, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like straightforwardly, I've been really troubled by the number of reviews and by the number of people who are not fat people who have described this as a humanizing performance. When what it at its core does is,
I don't think it's humanizing. I think it's like a horror movie. It describes in a lot of ways obesity and being gay as a horror, which I think it was, you know, as somebody who is obese and gay, it was a little too on the nose for me. It was kind of a lot, but you know, that was his experience, the writer, and that was his biggest fear, was to be obese and whatever. And I guess to be obese and gay, I don't know. I mean, it was kind of like, I only thought it was weird because like it was just such an identity focused movie where it was so like the only conflict was his identity of being gay and of being massively obese. And it was just a plot structure I had never really seen. And it, like I said, it makes a lot more sense as a play. But that was kind of my criticism of it, which I was like, this is just uncomfortable and weird in a lot of ways. And I felt like it was overall kind of meaningless. That was my interpretation of it. But I don't see fatness as this like be all end all of like it's this special thing that you can never comment on. And I also don't feel that way about being a homosexual either, especially, you know, the person who wrote the play is gay. That's his take or whatever. I didn't particularly like it, but that's still like his right to talk about it in the way he wanted to. Even if I also, as an also gay person, didn't like it. That's like whatever. It was entertaining enough. I don't think I ever have to see it again. I think the acting was really good. And I was riveted while I watched it, but it was disturbing. And at the end, I was kind of unsatisfied in general. That's my opinion. So again, I didn't think it was the most fatphobic movie. I'm like, if anything, it was kind of giving a lot of self-hating gay energy in the movie. And it was a lot for me to watch. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, it was kind of too much for me personally. But again, that's my personal opinion. And it's like, you don't have to like the movie, but you can like the movie. I don't think you're a horrible person if you liked it. It's not a big deal. It is what it is. If some people felt that it was humanizing, I can kind of see why. I think a lot of people have never considered being really obese and what it's like. And maybe that was an introduction to that. And if it had a positive impact, then it had a positive impact on that person. It's a work of art. It's fiction. Get over it. It's not always going to be comfortable. It's not always going to make you feel nice. It doesn't have to. You know? I don't know.
Reaffirm thin people's existing and pretty biased beliefs about very fat people, right? Also, on top of that, it is a play about a very fat person, and it's called The Whale, right? Like, just like on its face, it's pretty insulting, despite the fact that there are like Moby Dick references and all of that sort of stuff, right? Like, that is drawing a pretty clear line in the public imagination about where this story is going. And in my...
Yes, it was a play written in my opinion, the self-hatred of the person who wrote it. So, yes, he's going to call it The Whale because he was overweight, I believe, if I remember correctly, and he hated that he was overweight. It is a self-hatred piece, which again, it can be disturbing to some people or uncomfortable. And it was to me, especially in regard to the gay issue within the movie, it was just a lot. And again, it's like, I have no issue with him writing it. I have no issue with him making the movie. I have no issue with people liking the movie. It's just for me personally, I didn't like it. And that's my right to not like it, right? I didn't like the conflation of being gay with being obese that I felt was in that movie. And I found that to be kind of gross, to be honest. That's how I interpret it, though. It's okay to be gross in a movie. It's totally fine. You know, I'm not like a censorship type of person, especially with arts and stuff like that. Like, I'm not really that way. So it's like, do you, boo? You know, I hope it made him feel better. I hope it was cathartic. I hope people enjoyed it. That's my view of it, you know, that's about it.
Experience with that source material, that is exactly where it goes. It sort of reinforces deeply biased beliefs about fat people being isolated, unlovable, unable to control themselves or regain control of their own bodies, and so on. It's a rough one.
The name of the book is You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People. It is from Aubrey Gordon. It is out tomorrow. Aubrey, thank you so much for sharing your book with us.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, you guys. Looks like we made it to the end. I want to say thank you guys so much if you made it to the end. I haven't done a long form one in a long time. I've missed you guys. I've missed my long form girlies and boilies. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It's certainly interesting to do deep dives on fat acceptance because I feel like I can really say a lot of ground in one video of like my views on a lot of different things. And I feel like you guys can think about your views on a lot of different things within a deep dive. So I appreciate you guys so much that appreciate these videos. And I will be back tomorrow. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm glad I finally made the time to do it. I wanted to do this for a while. I will see you guys again very soon. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a good rest of your day, night, whatever. Peace.